So we observe that this slot cuts through all of the ribs. It's also cut through on the other side, but we see that it didn't cut through here, didn't cut through here. Now let's go back to that feature, and I'm going to say edit feature, and we set this to go through all. Now sometimes that can be ambiguous. Earlier when we created these ribs, we couldn't do those through all. We had to set it to the top face. I'm just going to drag this out here a little bit further, some distance, let's say 100. Maybe we tie it as a function to the diameter so that it's always going beyond the diameter, whatever parameter number that was, of the cylinder. I'll say OK to that. Now when I do that, notice everything updates the way we expected it to originally. All right, let's go back though to the first sketch. So I'm going to edit the first sketch, and we'll look at this from the top view. And I observe that there is a dimension here that is really a duplication of this dimension. It's just half of this diameter. So we don't need to do duplications like that, so I'm going to delete it. All right, now I'm going to zoom in here. When I delete that dimension, I see that this is no longer fully constrained. I'll try to drag it and see what happens. And I observe that this point is not coincident to this arc. So I'll make this point coincident to this arc. Everything turns black. It's now fully defined without having that extraneous dimension in the sketch. I'm going to accept that, and hopefully that didn't affect any of our downstream operations. Okay, so I observed the geometry and everything still looks correct, but I want to look at some other things. Let's rotate around here, and I'm going to zoom in here, and I'm going to turn off the visibility of this origin down here. I don't need to see that. So let's hide that. Actually, there's a sketch that's visible too. I'll hide that sketch for now. But I'm going to zoom in here, and notice there's this little piece of geometry that is actually one of these external ribs, a little piece of it that is left over, and I think it's on both sides of this. And so we have this extraneous geometry right here. That could actually be what was causing that problem with the extrude through all. Some kind of unintended geometry that really shouldn't be, or we don't want it in our design. So let's look at how we could fix it. But notice this is really small geometry in here and over on the other side. It would be real easy to miss that geometry that's hanging there in space. Okay, so the way I'm going to fix that is I'm going to go back to the original sketch. I'm going to edit that sketch. And actually, before I do that, I'm going to drag the timeline marker all the way back because we're going to make some significant changes, and we'll need to go step by step in order to fix the issues that we run into. So I'm going to edit this sketch, and again, I'll go to the top view, and I'm going to delete this construction line. Okay, when I do, these two circles are able to move again. And so rather than have this point straight up from the origin, I'm going to put this point straight up from the origin. So I'm going to draw a line from this point. Now I might have trouble getting it. We'll see if it gets it or not. From here down to the origin. I'll then put a vertical constraint on that. It should turn black. Okay, everything turns black. I'll change that to a construction line and back in and then observe everything. Everything looks okay. And I'm going to finish that sketch. Well, but let's go back to this, edit that sketch for a second. So we had this as a variable name. That we could use that variable name in the future, actually the dimension D1, to control other parameters. And then we'll go to the uh, next sketch. Let's make that sketch visible. And I'm going to rotate around, and I'll edit that sketch to take a look at it. And when I look at it, I see a whole bunch of mirror or symmetry constraints. The mirror will result in a symmetry constraint, or if you did symmetry constraint. Anyways, I rarely ever use symmetry constraint. And so I'm going to delete these constraints. I'll delete that one. And when I do, I see that this line turns blue. I'll try dragging it, and I see that it's not tangent to this arc up here. So I prefer to use a tangent rather than a symmetry. I also see a symmetry constraint up here. I'll delete that. I very, very rarely use symmetry constraints. And when I do that, this arc turns it turns blue again, indicating it's not fully constrained, and I see that this point isn't coincident. So coincident is the most basic constraint. I would always choose coincident over any other constraint. And I see a symmetry constraint here, and I might have trouble getting this. Let's see if I can drag it out away from that line. Maybe I'll be able to get it and delete that. Okay, and again, I see the reason that was in there was to keep this point coincident to there. I'll use coincident rather than symmetry. Okay, so I've got that. And then I'll come down here. And I thought I had some more down here. I guess I erased all of those. So I tend to avoid using symmetry constraints or mirror. I don't mirror objects. Very rarely. Once in a while I will. All right, I'll finish that sketch now. That might cause some problems doing all that, so we'll see what it does. Okay, so our first operation is our extrude. Our second operation is a shell. Our third operation is an extrusion. Let's edit that feature. And if we rotate around here, let me get around here where we can see what's going on here. And I might make that first sketch visible so we can see this better. Okay, so we're extruding this circle down here. Remember, we moved those two circles, so I'm going to edit that feature. But notice it's highlighting this entire blue area back here. And if I finish sketch, it's filled that back in again. So I'm going to do a control unselect that area. And so I only want this area and this area out here. I'll control select that area. That gives me that rib. Okay. And then I'll go to the next one. And that one did okay without having to edit it. Although I want to, again, make sure that I get, even though we only really need the inside circle, I want to make sure it actually used both circles. So I'm going to say edit feature. And okay, so it used both halves of that circle. And so I'll say okay to that. And I can hide sketch number 1 now. I no longer need to see that visible. I'll go to the next feature was a revolve of those. And that was a good catch on there. I think originally it was set to 380, which is actually, because there were 2 circles there, only needed half of that, 190. So that was a good catch on that. And then we'll go to the next feature. And the next feature fails. So I'm going to edit that feature. And notice it doesn't highlight the cutting distance. And so remember the original, when we did that extrusion of these ribs, we told it to go up to that face, the top face, when we should have been able to tell it to go through all. I think there's something similar here that the computer, the Fusion doesn't understand, and it gives us a warning here, a message. It's kind of cryptic about that, that it can't, it needs a clear overlap. Okay, that's the key there, is it needs a clear overlap on the edges where edges are nearly coincident. So I'm going to edit sketch number 2, and let's get out of the, we were partway in the command. Let's edit sketch number 2, and I'm going to look at it where we're looking directly at it. And so this top edge is nearly coincident, or it's confused there where that top edge is. So I'm going to help it out. I'm going to draw a rectangle here. I'm going to draw a rectangle. I'll put it about like that. And then I'm going to drag this point over here. And I'm going to change these 2 lines as construction. So I'll crossing windows, select those, change those 2 to construction. And then I'm going to make this line. It doesn't matter how tall this is. It just needs to be above this line. And so I'll do equal. And so this is kind of a tip that a beginner would have difficulty figuring out what in the world is going on here. Why is the software getting confused about that height, that near coincident? It's going out to 16 decimal places, and somehow the computer just got confused on that. So we'll give it a little bit more height on there. That ensures that it's above that edge. And then we'll cut out that slot, and then we'll do the circular pattern. And again, on this extrusion, I'm going to make sure that it goes beyond, not just to that edge, but beyond that edge by some distance. And again, you can make this a function. Let's say D1. That was that original diameter. D1. So it'll go out. Remember, it's going out from the center, so the radius is going out that diameter distance. That'll make sure that it always goes through the entire object. So there are a lot of interesting little quirks that show up in this model. Oh, and let's go back and change. Look at that little, remember we had that little piece that was hanging out here because of the location of those ribs. When we moved those ribs, it took care of that issue. An interesting problem, especially for a beginner with the issues that we ran into.